It's 7 a.m., fellow IT security brethren, and you're listening to LeetSpeak with Alissa Knight on a chilly June morning in Stuttgart, Germany. You work in the greatest industry at no better time than now, when data breaches are at an all-time high, credit cards and identities are being sold to the highest bidder, and you know what? You're in over your head. You're drowning in zero-day exploits when you're still trying to remediate the vulnerabilities from last year's penetration test. Especially you, CISOs. Within the last few years, you've just begun getting your head around securing your on-premise assets. Now you've been given directive to move everything to the cloud, where you have no control over the infrastructure. What used to be a cost center and an IT problem is now a boardroom problem, and your CEO wants regular presentations to the board on the state of security at your company. What was once securing your Apache and IIS servers has now turned into securing someone else's software as a service. Only 90 days before your next penetration test, and you're still trying to remediate the vulnerabilities from the last one, and the powers that be decide whether you're destined for greatness, mediocrity, or the unemployment line because someone in accounting clicked on a link in a spearfish from it@hotmail.com. I know what you're thinking. Do I really belong here? Probably not. But don't give in, don't give up. Arise, fair CISO, arise. You too can be secure, if not just for a month. You just have to unplug all the network cables, Wi-Fi, and give all employees a typewriter first. And until then, sit back, relax, and join us for this week's episode of LeetSpeak.
Alissa Knight.
That major hack attack against Sony. First, the studio's movies.
3 days after Target confirmed hacking the payment information from as many as 40 million customer credit and debit cards.
Incoming message. It's Friday, and that means time for another episode of LeetSpeak with Alissa Knight, bridging the gap between all things information security, where we'll talk the latest vulnerabilities, threats, security conferences, malware, and exploits, as well as interview CISOs and CIOs from around the world on the IT risk management topics that matter most. Alissa Knight. One woman, one mission, one voice.
Good morning, interwebs! It's Friday, June 17th, and we're coming to you live, well, partially live, as in live when I recorded it, from Stuttgart, Germany. We have some very special guests planned for our first episode of LeetSpeak. Derek Cheng, the Chief Information Security Officer for Electronic Arts.
Oh my god, he's so cute!
We'll be talking about digital transformation at EA and the rest of the gaming industry now in the cloud, and a completely different perspective from the CISO of a very connected city, the city of San Diego, Gary Hayslip. For the sake of open disclosure, both Derek Cheng and Gary Hayslip are advisors on the board at Briar & Thorn, so let's get started. Our first guest joins us from Electronic Arts, a global interactive entertainment software company that delivers games, content, and online services for internet-connected consoles, personal computers, and mobile phones. EA is recognized for a portfolio of critically acclaimed, high-quality blockbuster brands such as The Sims, Madden NFL, EA Sports, and FIFA. Derek, welcome to the show.
Oh my god, it's bigger than we thought!
Thank you. Thank you for having me, Alissa.
So, you're actually joining us from London, are you not?
That's right.
So
nice.
Tell me about London. What's going on? Oh, actually, the Brexit. What is going on?
The Brexit is all about the Brexit.
Okay, I know. I'm not. I told myself I refuse to call it the Brexit because I'm just so tired of hearing people say it. But you know what? Yeah. So tell me. Let's. Yeah. What's going on? I imagine things are pretty chaotic there.
It's pretty chaotic. The day, or the morning, I should say, of the announcement, people were actually moved to tears, whether it was on the streets, on the bus. It was absolutely ridiculous. And, you know, there's a lot of hysteria. So, you know, the government was trying to keep people calm, but it was pretty heartfelt, especially in London, where, you know, the majority of folks were voting to remain. And then now there's just a lot of controversy and a lot of hearsay about what's going to happen next, especially with Scotland. as a country as a whole, they voted over 60% to remain. So they're trying to they're trying to block Brexit all by themselves, just because they are, a country that in pretty much every county in Scotland was over 60% remain. So that's quite interesting, right? Because if they want to stay in the EU, one of the things that some of the articles are suggesting is that Scotland's going to try to vote out of the UK at that point, so that they can stay with the EU.
Oh wow! Well, okay.
Yeah.
I have to. I can. I'm sure viewers want to know what was your vote. Did you vote to stay in or
Well, that's the part of that's quite sad for me, is because I felt quite powerless. Right, I'm still a U.S. citizen, even though I'm a UK resident. I'm not allowed to vote, but I would have voted to remain.
Yeah, no, I understand. Well, thanks for the update on that. So you actually just got back from vacation, right?
Yes, many.
Yeah, you're like and we can talk about that as well. I'm sure. I don't know if you're allowed to announce your transition yet, but
yes, I'm happy to announce that.
About that. I know you're transitioning out of So where did you go for vacation?
So I went to Punta Cana in the Dominican Republic. I went for my big birthday.
Happy belated birthday! I have to ask, how old did you just turn?
40.
Oh, okay. You're still a young spring onion.
Still young. I like to tell myself that too every day.
So now, didn't you go to San Francisco?
I do go there for work. So my last time I was there was in May. And it was sad because I gave my notice, a few months ago. So at that time I had to say goodbye to my friends and family there too.
Oh, yeah. I know you've been how long have you been with EA?
8 years.
8 years. Oh my gosh. Yeah, that's definitely it's more family than friends at this point.
And EA is a great company. The environment's not for everyone. It's quite chaotic, but it's quite addictive at the same time. So I could easily see myself being here much longer too. There's a lot of EA lifers.
What was the impetus to leave? Was it just starting a new chapter in your book, or is it
I would say that's the second part of it, but the main part was really around location. At the end of the day, even though I'm based in London and there is a London based office, it's actually out in Guildford. I work for a California based company.
Yeah.
So it just means a lot of flying, a lot of nights. Just working to cover the U.S. hours. So, I've been doing that for about 4 years. So about half of my tenure at EA has been in London. And it's just, it's just taken a toll on me, actually, to be honest. So I'm excited for the new job. It's London based. But I will definitely miss working for EA. I still love the company. I love the gaming world.
Yeah, totally. So have you already decided on where your next home is going to be?
Yeah, so I'm going to be working for TalkTalk. I'll be joining as our chief security officer there. And you guys probably know TalkTalk is best known for, at this point, the well publicized cybersecurity breach that they suffered in October last year.
Yeah. It's definitely good that you're coming after that, right?
Yes.
You definitely don't want to be associated with that. It's good that it's even the next year. So
yeah,
people don't remember months; they remember years.
Correct. And the great thing is, my number one thing that I was looking for my next move was around work culture. Just because EA has such a great kind of relaxed work culture. I mean, at the end of the day, you do make video games. Yeah. And TalkTalk, I was pleasantly surprised, has a very similar work culture to EA. Quite chaotic still, but also a very relaxed feel to their environment.
Cool.
The company's quite young. The average age is 30. So it's great.
Yeah. So does it still kind of have? Do they maintain their startup vibe? The Silicon Valley
Absolutely.
kind of, slides instead of staircases.
Yeah, 100%. And that's actually the majority of my interview questions were really focused around that. And they were also surprised, and also it was refreshing to hear that EA was very similar still. in terms of, growing through acquisitions and still kind of a startup feel in certain aspects of the organization. So it was just a perfect fit.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's awesome. Well, I'm sure, our viewers are wanting to just, understand, obviously, digital transformation in the context of electronic arts, and also probably not just EA, but the gaming industry as a whole. This has been your, what you ate, slept, and drank, and for the last 9 years. So you understand the online gaming industry, you understand gaming industry in general. For those who are wanting to understand this better, can you just sort of define what the digital transformation strategy has been at EA?
Sure.
We're lately, it said, okay, well, we engage, relate, and buy things because of the experiences they provide, because of their transformative power. With technologies like Oculus Rift, Microsoft HoloLens, how these technologies have brought the gamer into more of a fully immersive experience, which, where games originally started out on box set televisions, are now being brought into our world, especially with Oculus Rift. So can you tell me how that's affected companies like EA, what the digital transformation strategy has been? That's
Sure. So digital transformation has been one of the major big bets we've had over the last few years. And digital transformation for us at EA is all about moving digital content, whether it's the player purchasing and downloading the game digitally, or us being able to offer downloadable content to continue the shelf life of the game. And I think a few years ago, if I'm not mistaken, EA's business, we announced that it's now over 50% digital, which is a huge shift for us, because as you know, our original business was really around the packaged goods business. Sure. So going more digitally definitely means we're able to keep our operating expenses down, which is a big plus. But it just opens up kind of a can of worms around different risks around protecting customer data, because we're collecting more and more information about the player.
Sure, yeah. So there's the concern over PII, and also, accepting payment card information for those buying, virtual currency with EA games. That's interesting. So
yeah.
So there's definitely been a decommission, if you will, of EA's typical pizza boxes in the data center to cloud servers then.
Right, exactly. So less on the physical supply chain aspect, and then more around the digital content and what that actually means. So whether it's like microtransactions, which we have a ton of, right? Because, for instance, like a game like The Sims, you have a lot of players who are buying, that IKEA furniture for 99 cents that they really want in their house, or whatever it may be, right? And we just get a ton of those. So a lot of microtransactions that help contribute to the digital challenge.
How has obviously the poor Sony, you get to a point where you just start to really feel bad for them, with their initial compromise, and then the recent compromise of the employee, right, and now the class action lawsuits. How has the litigation around that and the compromises regarding Sony and just the targeting of online gaming companies in general changed or affected your strategy at EA? Obviously, I'm sure you've had lessons learned, post-mortem analysis of those events and how they might affect EA. So yeah, how has EA responded to things like Sony?
Yeah, it's definitely impactful for us, just because we're all kind of in the same boat. So back in, I think it was 2011, 2012, when they first had the major Sony PSN hack, that was huge for our industry, because the CEO at that time was first to say this cannot happen to EA. Absolutely not. So we kicked off a multi-year kind of cybersecurity initiative just to ensure that we had the right controls in place to help mitigate from from being the next Sony, for lack of better words. And at that time, we, in understanding the kind of the adversaries and some of the kind of attackers, they were really focused, at least from our perspective, on PII and PCI data.
Right.
And then over time, we've seen a shift in, other areas, more like, intellectual property. They're focused on, trying to take source code, that sort of thing. And they're less interested, at least from our perspective, on the credit card and PII data. This seems to be several years ago now.
Oh, interesting. Okay,
Yeah.
So would you say that there was more of a shift towards re-looking at the entire information security management system at EA to, actually, instead of the deployment of disjointed security controls around the network, like, network intrusion detection, host intrusion detection, and I won't ask you to go any specifics about the controls there, but, what was there's sort of a pause where this was an impetus to, okay, let's actually formalize this. Let's put this. Let's wrap all of these great things that we've got deployed. Do a gap analysis of what controls we're missing, and actually approach this from an information security management system framework perspective, like whether it's based on NIST or ISO 27001. Do you see like sort of a before and after in regards to recent events?
Yeah, absolutely. So our original we call it the Global Information Security Policy. That is based off ISO and COBIT.
Oh, okay.
Quite lightly though, just because the part that's quite challenging with EA is it's quite unregulated in work environment. So that's good and bad in many aspects, right? So our Global Information Security Policy is based off those standards. However, after the initial Sony PSN hack, we decided to leverage the SANS top 20 critical security controls. That definitely helped focus on more kind of deeper security controls and processes for us. So that helped frame up a lot of things. Now, that we're getting into more kind of the APT type of world, we are adjusting our frameworks so that we have a more intelligence-based framework. So really around, cyber intelligence, whether it's from, our friends in the government bodies and regulators, or, whether it's our own intelligence that we've gathered, internally at EA using our own tools, or in the industry. So we partner a lot with some of our competitors as well as some of the big tech companies in the Bay Area around knowledge sharing.
Oh, okay.
So it's important that we build our controls around that so that we're able to accept and digest that information, but also be able to share information as well. So it's been quite an interesting space to see that kind of evolve. Also, I'm not sure if you guys see this as well, but it's just been nice, being in information security for, quite some time. And I just feel like over the last few years, I've seen a shift in terms of how InfoSec people respond to these things, in terms of how we communicate with one another. I think inherently information security people are paranoid by nature, right? So when you get in a room and you talk about things, you get very, very limited information. And I just feel like over time, people are more willing to share just a little bit more. It's not perfect yet, but I feel like just a little bit more. And I think over time, people start realizing it's not really about, whether you got a breach or if you had an incident. It's more about what data can you actually share that can help me. So it's been nice to see that shift.
Yeah, I would agree with that completely. I think not only have the threats changed, a lot of people have heard me say this time and time again. We're no longer facing 14-year-olds picking their nose in their bedroom and defacing websites, with WooFTPD, mass scanners and auto routers. Those days are definitely gone now. It's what data can be monetized. What can we do? How can we make money off of the data that this particular target has? It's more about the monetization of data rather than, taking bragging rights of, through mass defacements So yeah, a lot has changed, I think, in the industry, not just also, like you said, not just the threat actors, but also our own willingness to talk and share. I think, one of the things is, someone that's worked in the industry a long time, I'm sure you can agree with me. We very much definitely, I think, have a tendency to work in a vacuum. And okay, there's only so much I should be talking about in regards to our own security controls and what we're doing and what works and what doesn't work. And I'm just going to go do the research that I need to in order to figure out what my gaps are and how to fill them. I think there's definitely been a shift towards more information sharing. Do you think it's really been promulgated by conferences like Black Hat briefings, DEF CON, where there's this formalized kind of get together and talk about what's broken and in some cases how to break it? But I definitely agree with you that there's definitely been a shift. What do you think has really driven that shift in us, as security practitioners starting to reach out to each other and starting to work together?
I think people are starting to realize there's no way in the world that, if you've never experienced a security incident at this point, right? So, it sounds cliche now when people say it's not about if, it's the when.
Yeah.
When so I think, that, as much as that has gone out, so I think people realize, okay, well, it's not just me, clearly. And I know that someone else has information that I can probably, benefit from. So when you go to these, conferences, it's really around that part of it, right? It's sharing the information around it, but also not really caring about how it affected that other person's company, because, it doesn't actually really matter at that point, right? It's a matter of what you did to respond, and did you get any indicators of compromise that you can share, that sort of thing. So I feel like the fact that people are starting to realize that it's happening to everyone, and that we all have to kind of stick together as information security professionals just to get, to win this battle. I think that is contributing to the shift in mentality.
Yeah, no, I agree, and I embrace it. I think it's great. We definitely need to work together, in these, different times, in order to, address those issues. So one question that I definitely like to talk about and want to get your input on is, how the perimeter has changed. And it was funny. I just got back from a trip from Jamaica. I was meeting with one of our telecom customers, and the group of the head of group security, Dan Nutu, made a really good point. He was talking about how tired he was of hearing penetration testers say, "Hey, look, I didn't really find any exploitable vulnerabilities in this external pen test because it's the whole, cliche of, hard candy exterior, soft gooey interior of networks." And so we had a laugh about it, but, it does raise a good point. The network has changed so much now. Penetration testers really aren't finding anything on the perimeter. Exploitable Apache installations or exploitable Woo FTPD installations are just so 1997, right? The defense in depth of multiple layers of security and your perimeter extending to an employee at EA or at Starbucks has definitely changed things. And so I'd love to get your input on that. What is your response to that in regards to the fact that we're no longer saying, well, the perimeter is dissolving. The perimeter literally is no longer there anymore, right?
Yeah.
I'm sure you remember that, when we used to walk around, right. The perimeter is dissolving, or the dissolving perimeter, and it's gone. It is dissolved, and it's very much now more about, actors going through the side door with over a VPN connection to get into the internal network. And now, where we used to ignore the vulnerabilities in the internal network, we're now starting to focus on them because it like you said, it's not about if but when. And so now that they are on the internal network, either through VPN or through spear phishing, they're on the internal network, and we now need to secure the internal network like we used to focus on the perimeter. So
Right.
what's your input on that?
You know, I do believe still in defense in depth, absolutely. But I think when people say defense in depth, they are talking about, at least from my perspective, it seems like they are talking about, okay, let's start from the perimeter, and then we go one layer deeper, and then one layer deeper. And the way I view it is, it's just, maybe I should just call it more layered security, right? So layered list of controls, whether it's at the perimeter or internal, right? So I think there's been, at least from my perspective, there's been two major shifts. One is, you know, rather than focusing the majority of your controls on the preventative type of controls and processes, there's obviously been a shift on still doing preventative, but a more of a focus on the monitoring and response aspect of security. And then, you know, it's interesting because as we're, you know, going down and learning more about, you know, sophisticated attacks, you know, at EA or in our industry, some of the responses that we get from management is interesting, right? Because then, you know, they're not familiar with security, so there's a whole, you know, slew of questions that come up. And ones that come up is really around, oh, do we need AV anymore? You know, do we even need vulnerability scanning? You know, there's some of the basic type stuff, firewalls, is that even important anymore? So it's interesting to kind of go through those discussions where, you know, we still need to do kind of the commodity type stuff, right? But also it's, you know, there's a whole new can of worms that you have to address in terms of, you know, the advanced malware, APT, those type of things. So, yeah, exactly. You can't swap one for another. It's two separate things, and you have to they have to play nicely with each other. So I think that's important. And then also, I do agree that there should be less attention on the perimeter these days. Not to take away from existing controls that should be there. Again, like firewalls, you know, content filtering, those things should absolutely be there. But there should be a focus definitely on the internal network, whether it's like, you know, segmentation of the network, you know, the threats like insider threat, it's huge. So having a proper, you know, DLP is important, that sort of thing, to really focus on the internal network, because there's a whole slew of things that happens, you know, outside of, or inside of the perimeter that you have to get control over.
So I have to ask, what technologies do you like the most? What, you know, I mean, you've seen, you know, there's a lot of M&A in the security industry, right? There's just a lot of smaller guys getting eaten up by the bigger blue chip companies, you know. Companies like SourceFire getting acquired by Cisco, you know, HP acquiring ArcSight. There just really aren't many independent players in the security industry anymore. And with the constant roll-ups and M&As, I mean, if you think about it, you know, I mean, can you name one network intrusion detection system company that is an independent network IDS anymore? You know, I mean, the SourceFires of the world, or, you know, so a lot of it is constantly evolving and changing. What are some of the technologies that you like and you've used and you found effective?
Yeah, so it's just one thing that just kind of made me react to what you were just saying too. It is true, and it's quite tricky too, because some of the companies that we're familiar with, without me naming any names, if you look back just a few years ago, their solution was pretty much marketed as an IT tool, which it absolutely is. There's a number of them that are just IT administrative tools that are excellent. They do well. However, the sales were not going up. So now you look back, now you look at their marketing strategy, and it's all about cybersecurity suddenly, right? And you know, it comes, and the reason why I'm aware of it, because it comes to me, and they're asking me, "Oh, look at this security tool." I'm like, "Well, actually, it's not a security tool. If you look at the end of the day, it's actually an IT administrator's tool with a security, you know, flavor to it." So we have to be careful with, you know, determining what is truly a security tool and what is more an IT administrative tool that is best practice that has a security flavor to it. So I've been trying to make that distinction. I'm going through that conversation all the time at EA, and also when vendors come and talk to me.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, so that's tricky, right? Because everyone's trying to jump on the cybersecurity bandwagon, right? Because it's obviously a hot topic. Yeah, yeah. So with regards to some of the favorite tools, I completely agree with you. It's an interesting space, especially around the more advanced attacks with APTs, etc. I feel like a lot of security companies are doing their best in terms of researching and updating their tools so that it can address some of the attacks that they're facing. I think the tool that we've deployed that we had a lot of success with is actually Bit9 and Carbon Black.
Okay,
we have a
yeah,
lot
I was going to
of
ask you about that, like this, the Cylances of the world where we're starting to sort of, semantic and these other signature-based technologies, AV just aren't really doing it anymore. We do, the endpoint security controls like Carbon Black. That's something we at Briar & Thorn actually get a lot of questions around, is recommendations for that. So you actually have used it and do actually like that technology.
Yeah, it's great. I mean, from the Bit9 perspective, it's application whitelisting.
Right.
So if you follow the path of how it should be ran, it definitely helps, especially when you put it in high enforcement, to block any executables that should not be running. So that's been absolutely fantastic.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but it's taking the approach of allowing what we know is good versus trying to block things that we know is bad, and the things that are bad just changes every hour. It's not even every day. It's just the bad things evolve and change every hour, and so it's a lot easier to allow specific things to run that we know should be running versus trying to block everything that's bad.
Absolutely.
So
that's correct.
Yeah. So have you played with Cylance? Are you?
It's funny you mentioned that. We're just doing a POC on Cylance, and it's on my list of things to review how that POC has gone. Yeah. Yeah, I've heard great things about it so far. It is quite interesting, their approach to doing it. But I believe we have some comments and suggestions on how that compares to our we use McAfee for our McAfee solution. Yeah. So yeah. Yeah. More to come.
It's interesting. I think it's really gone more. It's funny how much it's shifted, and it really seems to be more about securing the human. We can't, no matter how many, whether we put in, FireEye devices or we put in, is SourceFire, whatever it is, if you have a human clicking on any link they want in the email or double clicking on an attachment, a lot of those controls just get, just put by the wayside, right? It's difficult to try and address that risk, and other than information security awareness training, and I'm sure that's been a huge effort at EA as well, is trying to train employees on not clicking on what has EA adopted in as far as trying to secure the human and address that issue?
I'm glad you asked that, actually. I've done a number of talks specifically around security awareness, our creative approach to addressing that. I think, working for a creative company, we're often challenged with, you should have some sort of creativity with security, if that's even possible, right? It almost sounds like an oxymoron at this point, right? So it's interesting because a lot of the employees that we deal with are in the creative space, whether it's developers and artists, that sort of thing. So if you get their attention is quite short if it's not interesting, right? If you're going to come to them with dry information security, data or training, they're not going to enjoy it or digest it. So what we've done is we partner quite closely with our Sims team. So obviously our Sims is the game that you can create your own family and virtual family and life and environment. And we leveraged our own intellectual property around the animations for our simoleons, is what we call them. And we created a series of security awareness training videos.
Oh,
Yeah, to really cover all of our, major tenets of our global information security policy, and also to address any of the topical type of security threats that that our employees may be facing. So obviously, phishing was a big campaign for us, as well as, password management is always a good one. Insider threat is great, especially after the Sony Pictures incident around their intellectual property.
right.
So yeah, it's been fantastic, and the response has been amazing around the videos, because they're fun, they're a little cheeky, they're just 2 minutes long, and it's great, and it's
You have to
perfect.
make
People
it
pay
engaging,
attention.
right? I mean, who
Yeah,
wants to,
exactly.
I think the days of reading PDF files and white papers are gone, right? Everyone wants to watch videos and, learn more interactively. And I think a lot of the training videos is moving in that direction where, it's not just about understanding what the indicators of a spearfish are, but, hey, let me show you a spearfish, and you choose the indicators in the email that look suspicious, and
Yeah,
try
exactly.
to get them to understand that. A lot of employees these days, I still don't. I think they still don't understand the difference between, okay, this website is an IP address instead of a DNS name, right? And a lot of them aren't going to look up in the URL field and say, okay, well, why am I on an IP address instead of the internal corporate intranet? So I
Right.
think it's just getting them to understand those things that are definitely going to be more esoteric, but getting them to realize and recognize those things. So that's
Yeah.
interesting.
Yeah, and animation works. I don't care what anyone says. At the end of the day, I think every adult likes a good cartoon.
Sure, definitely.
Yeah, it's just different, right? So it's been great, and now because of the great response, we're creating our rebranded new annual security training based off our Sims videos.
Oh, that is so cool.
Yeah, so it'll be mandatory training for all new hires and existing employees to take every year, just to ensure that they understand the basics.
That's great. That's great advice. That's very unique. I've never really heard of companies doing something like that. But putting internal developers to use on that and developing something internally that's more animated and fun.
Yeah.
It'd be interesting to find out if companies like Inga or other farm bill that sort of thing are adopting the same practice. I think that's just so important.
So what was interesting is we actually didn't know. Look, so we had a hunch that it was going to be a big success if we were able to engage the Sims team. So that was expected.
Yeah.
What we didn't expect was when we actually reached out to them, they were super excited and just flattered that we would choose them to use their IP for it. So they were on. They loved it 100%. Because they were very proud, right? They're very proud of the work that they've done, the IP that they've created, and to have that be publicized and used as part of security training for all employees. They're like, yes, absolutely, yeah. They got into it, yeah.
Yeah, well, it's funny. I'm gonna date myself here, but I remember. I think other than Oregon Trail, the next game that I think I remember playing when I was really young was SimCity. And creating that virtual city and the virtual families, and so that's great that that team was able to be pulled into this effort and develop something like that. So, question about cloud and I think we're coming to the bottom of the hour here, but a lot of companies that we've spoken to, a lot of CISOs that we've spoken to have really struggled in the area of, securing your servers at AWS or Azure is definitely a lot more difficult than when you have, a 1U pizza box in your data center. You can pretty much deploy anything you want, grab NetFlow data off of the switches and, and the routers, and, deploying network IDS, whereas in AWS or Azure, you don't get any control over that infrastructure. You're really relegated to the security controls that are available in the marketplace. What have you personally struggled with in that migration to the cloud and trying to, adapt to that new model. And I know, especially network intrusion detection with EC2 instances or whatever it may be is obviously a huge challenge. So what has been your personal experience in trying to overcome that?
Yeah, cloud is a tricky one for us. Especially oftentimes, cloud offerings, are, it's all about speed of execution for us. And, oftentimes they offer that as well as the comprehensive solutions for, game teams or whatever it may be. The issue for us is, always, from a security perspective, it's difficult to implement our own security controls. Anything from, basic vulnerability management all the way to kind of performing deep level forensics, right? So,
sure. Yeah,
when we
work, cloud servers.
yeah, it's really difficult, right? So we have to kind of pick and choose what we're going to put in the cloud. What works, what doesn't work, and also just to ensure, the business comes first, right? So we still have to enable the business to continue operating, but try to do it in a secure way. So when push comes to shove, if it's something that absolutely we need to control ourselves, again, from, security controls perspective, I think the part that gets us, puts us in a rock between a hard place is really around the forensics aspect of it. And when we work with certain vendors and ask for data or logs and whatnot, sometimes the response for that is not as quick as we would like. And I think it's because we have our own, in-house intrusions team to really just focus on that. Now, if we didn't have that, then perhaps, a lag wouldn't be as big of a deal. But because we have that, we are looking for data, pretty much like yesterday, right? So that is extremely important to us to get information as quickly as possible, which is why we don't leverage an MSSP anymore, just because we want more control of our data.
Yeah. I think the role of the MSSP is definitely changing. Obviously this is an area we're addressing at Briar and Thorn as an MSSP. I think, cloud is changing that a lot, especially, what companies want access to. I mean, we've worked with some cloud data centers where, in the compromise of a server, they provided absolutely no support at all for our client. We weren't able to DD the hard drive to any other servers. It was a real nightmare. And I think a lot of companies really need to do that homework when they're looking at cloud providers and trying to figure, okay, if there is an incident, asking that cloud provider what level of support will we get from you, what access to logs, or being able to do live forensics on the machine, what will we be allowed to do and not do. So I think it's a great segue to the last question is, what are your recommendations for other CISOs out there and other security engineers out there, and with all of your experience and everything you've done, what would be your top few recommendations for them?
That's a good one. I think the one that I love to talk about, I think it's also because I have a risk and compliance background, is for a new CISO, be careful around the risk management discussions. And what I mean by that is the whole input or impact times likelihood equals risk. Because we tend to do that and try to quantify everything. In terms of just trying to find, okay, let's do a gap analysis, right? Everyone does the gap analysis. And then you start identifying controls that you have to put in place. And then, it immediately bleeds into this whole risk discussion. And then you start doing your impact, and then you start doing your likelihood. And it gets into a situation where, at least for me, it just becomes this math exercise that you end up doing. Numbers game, math exercise. And what happens is, I think we all, as information security people, we know when you look at something, whether it's going to be a high or a medium. You just know. And when you put it into a framework where you have this, math algorithm and calculations that are happening, and it hits a medium, and you're like, actually, it should have been a high. Then you start really thinking back, okay, let's look at this algorithm again, just to make sure that it goes back to this high, because you know it should be high, right? Yeah, so I would say just be careful around that, especially when you present to a board or some sort of, security council, because once you do that, then it becomes a distraction for folks. And then you end up talking about, why did you rate it this, this likelihood a low, instead of this, right? And
yeah, risk assessments are very subjective, exactly.
Exactly. So I would say let's focus less on that and just more on the actual issue and what can we do to address it. I would say that would be my number one piece of advice.
That's awesome. I didn't expect that answer from you. Actually.
Something different, right?
I've never seen caution against risk assessments. That's a very interesting response, but definitely wise advice from someone who's worked in the industry for a long time and for such an exciting company. Derek, I know you're really busy. Thank you so much for joining us today and all of this valuable input. It's been great having you. Right now, I'd like to welcome Gary Hayslip to the show, the Chief Information Security Officer for the City of San Diego. Gary is responsible for developing and executing on a citywide cybersecurity strategy and leading teams focused on enterprise risk management and cybersecurity resiliency. His mission includes creating a risk-aware culture that places high value on securing city information resources and protecting personal information entrusted to the City of San Diego. Gary is currently a member and co-chief of the San Diego InfraGuard. He's an advisory board member with CyberHive, which is a San Diego cybersecurity incubator, and is, of course, an advisor on our board at Breyer & Thorne. I do want to thank Gary for his more than a decade of service to this country as the Command Information Security Officer and Deputy IT Director for the United States Navy and ISSM for the U.S. Navy Strike Division from 1987 to 2013. Gary, welcome to the show.
I'm the CISO for the 8th largest city in the United States, for San Diego, California. And before that, I was with the U.S. Navy. I was active duty military for about 20 years and retired. And after I retired from the Navy, I was decided to go ahead, and I was still having fun with the military, and still doing cyber. So I went ahead and did about 7 years civil service, working for the federal government, protecting the Navy's networks. And but after about 7 years of that, my fun meter was pretty pegged. I was just frustrated. There wasn't a lot of room for innovation. Everything was pretty much black and white, and unfortunately, the bad guys aren't doing black and white. They're being extremely innovative, and so I wanted to do something different. And so I was just finishing up my MBA, and I was working extensively with a lot of cyber startups, here in the local area. And I've heard that the city of San Diego had a new position open. They had a new CISO position, and I wanted to be the first to try it out and actually build a program. And I was kind of surprised when I come to the city that they right away told me that I could be innovative. There was no inhibitions, hey, you can't do this, or hey, you have to follow that. In fact, my
color
first
outside
day,
the lines.
yeah, oh yeah, it was quite interesting. I mean, my first day on the job, I was talking with my CISO, and I was talking with my CIO, and I asked him, I said, hey, I'm looking at all this stuff that I have here, and I'm just kind of getting my feet wet and seeing how big the issues are. And I was asking him, I said, what framework should I use to kind of start assessing this risk and kind of figuring out, how deep it is? And he just looked at me and he goes, framework, that's up to you. He goes, I really don't care. And that's when I realized, wow, we got issues here. But also at the same time, it made me realize I've got a lot of room to move. I got a lot of room to build. I've got a lot of, what I'm saying? They were definitely going to give me plenty of rope to hang myself, and so that was 3 years ago, and what I've discovered since then is it's actually quite unique. Unless you've actually worked for a city, from a technology perspective for a city, you don't understand how complex and how unique the systems are, and what I mean by that is To give you an idea, like the city of San Diego, I have 11,000 users, and I have about 40,000 endpoints.
Oh, that's a lot of endpoints.
Oh yeah, that's spread across the whole county, which is several hundred square miles, and that alone makes you kind of realize, okay, well that's kind of big. But then you take into account that it isn't one network; it's actually 24 network, and the technology that I'm dealing with ranges from stuff that was installed or built back in the 1980s to current cloud technologies.
So Windows 3.1, Windows 3.
No, actually, I don't have to worry about that. I mean, I've all my desktops, everything's upgraded to Windows 7. In fact, we're actually already deploying Windows 10 on a lot of stuff. The servers are updated, and like all of our servers are virtualized on convergent infrastructure on vBlocks. So there's some things we're very updated. And then there's other things that, we're still running on Solaris boxes, so it's one of those things that you kind of realize when you're looking at a city environment is that you're going to have a mix of technology. And the reason is that, cities aren't like businesses. Businesses, you're competing. You have competitors, so you want to be innovative. You want to be able to, kick the crap out of the guys that you're competing against and be able to win market share, be able to do whatever you're in business for. Well, cities don't have that. They don't have that drive. They don't have that push to innovate, that push to go ahead and be using the latest stuff. Unless, really, for us, it's the citizens that give us that initiative, that push to do something different. Otherwise, cities are more than happy to go ahead and use the same crap that they've been using for the last 20 years because it works. If it works, you don't have to spend money on it. So why? And what that does, unfortunately, is it makes them a very big target, and so a lot of people would ask, well, who the hell would want to hack a city? Why? There's, what do cities have that we could really care about? Well, what cities have that make them unique is the fact that they're not in a box. Their networks aren't in a box. Their networks interconnect with an amazing amount of other networks, so they're definitely a doorway for lateral movement. Even if you break into a city, and you're not really interested in what the city has, 9 times out of 10, you're interested in who they're connected to, And then another thing that a lot of people look at, cities connect, just a ton of data. It's amazing the amount of stuff they collect on business operations, and you're talking data that goes back decades.
So you're so the data that a threat actor would be interested in from the city networks in San Diego would be, we're saying, is monetizing personal identities, right? Whereas most companies would be more concerned about PCI data. For you, it's really just all of the data on all the citizens of San Diego.
Well, the thing about it is we have stuff like we have PCI data, because people are using credit cards to pay their water bill,
right.
And then that's one thing too is the complexity of city network. I've got libraries, I've got golf courses, I've got a cemetery, I've got police cars, I've got an amazing amount of crap that are on these networks. Okay, we're actually going through PCI certification right now as a level 2 merchant because we're doing about 150 million a year, in sales, because we have golf courses, people are paying their water bills, people are paying parking tickets, they're paying for permits to build, businesses, so, and we want to be able to offer them not just having to come in and pay cash or check, but offer them the ability to be able to do digital, to be able to use their credit card or pay by an electronic check or something. And so we're having to deal with PCI. So that's what I'm saying is that, we have HIPAA data on our networks. We have personal identifiable, data, PHI,
So pretty much everything.
Yeah, but almost any kind of data you can think of, we got a little bit of it. So, and that's what I'm saying is, I think, city networks, especially large cities, they are, they're almost a little bit of everything. You know what I'm saying? So
whereas it's easier in a business because it's just usually one type of data that they're trying to protect, right? And where cities
what I would give. Yeah. What I would give just to be a regular business. So
it's funny.
I would know.
Yeah, it's funny. I just got back from the Secure Car Conference in Munich, and there was a great presentation. A gentleman out of Japan, out of Tokyo, who started up an IoT honeypot and modeled out the data that they were seeing on the honeypot, and a lot of it were IoT devices like smart parking meters where people were where they were connected to the internet and were infected by IoT malware. And it's just I'm sure you're just, especially with digital transformation of the city of San Diego, I'm sure you're seeing more and more of that.
Yeah, I mean, we have, and that's what I'm saying is, so take that complexity of the networks and the data that you have, and the fact that I've got 40 departments, and all of them are doing some type of transformation on their technology, and that's one thing is, I mean, the city of San Diego, I have to admit, also is very unique in that the ecosystem we have here of innovation and technology and startups, and I mean, we're on the move. I mean, we're changing an amazing amount of our portfolio, the hardware technology and the software portfolio. I mean, we have 400 plus applications in our portfolio. About 280 of them are being replaced or rewritten in the next 18 months. I mean, it's that fast. And as a CISO, a lot of that's kind of daunting because of the fact, from a risk perspective, you don't have a baseline.
Right,
your baseline is constantly moving, and it's going to be probably moving for the next couple of years.
Definitely begs to ask, well, would something like a behavioral anomaly detection work in a network that you can't baseline? I mean, how?
Yeah.
I mean, you see businesses that are struggling to try and make make use of higher, let's say, smarter security controls, learning systems. I know that you guys use a behavioral anomaly detection system there, CyberFlow. How'd you make something like that work in a network you can't baseline?
I mean, well, that's what I'm saying is, I mean, we're using packet sled on the edge. Okay. Looking at all data coming and leaving, and packet sled has saved us numerous times on some of the malware infections we've had.
Oh, wow.
Because we're tying it into FireEye that really give us a multiple views on what's going on traffic, and then CyberFlow is in the core. But you're right. I mean, it's extremely, it is an issue when you don't have a baseline. Things keep changing, and so what you do is you have multiple tool sets that have overlapping views, and then you're continuously monitoring, you're continuously scanning. I don't trust anything, right. So I'm constantly looking at the networks, and then on top of that, the city of San Diego is doing the Smart City Initiative. We're following the ISO 37150 and 151 Smart City frameworks. We're following that initiative, and so we're having a lot of intelligent infrastructure that's now being brought online, that's now being connected to the networks. From the parking meters to the LED streetlights that are also a platform for traffic monitoring and HD video, and there's some really interesting stuff that's going on with sensors in the streets for parking, and trash trucks with GPS sensors so we can figure out better routes to save fuel. And so you've got all of these newer types of technologies that are being brought in. Again, one of the things that you run into with city networks is that, I'm sure a lot of your listeners are thinking, well, you can get rid of the legacy technologies. You can just go ahead and, rip and replace them and put in new stuff. Well, not so fast, because the thing about it is the cities don't shut down.
Right.
We're not 9 to 5, we're 24/7, and so, we don't shut the police department down or the 911 system down, or, we don't shut off, the water treatment facilities. And so because of this, there is a lot of legacy stuff that has to be replaced, but it takes extensive planning. There's a lot of times you end up having to go ahead and install the new technology in parallel and then go ahead and coordinate cutover. I mean, you just can't come in and rip and replace. Some of the large technology projects will take years for us to go ahead and put in play. And so that's some of the craziness that we deal with. When you're doing project planning, the scope of time for your projects at this scale is freaking huge. Compared to what you would deal with at a business.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, I headed up security at the University of Pittsburgh once upon a time, and I mean, just the university network, it was just daily firefights. I can't imagine at a city level. I mean, for you, it's not just, well, when a malware infection happens, this is what we do, or when there's a compromise, this is what we do. It's prioritizing all of the malware infections and compromises, I'm sure, because it's a constant, right? And it's trying to go after that's the most important, the most critical compromise, or the most, the worst, botnet. I can't imagine how porous the network is. So what do you do? I mean, you're dealing with not only just technology threats, and it sounds like, even stoplights with an IP address, traffic lights with an IP address now, but securing the human. I mean, you're also having to secure those endpoints that city workers are sitting at.
Yeah, I mean, and the thing about it is we've realized that, there's some things that, you do everything you can on the perimeter, with the firewalls and sensors and all the different tool sets that we're using, from a perimeter perspective. And you're doing your, we're constantly scanning and looking for issues to go ahead and remediate and to react to, but that's more reactive. Proactive wise, we realize, it's really about data and who's accessing it and what they're doing with it. And, so we're using, platforms like Varonis to really dig into our data and where it's at and what types of data we have and how it's being accessed and being able to audit and track, the permissions and what's going on with data. We're using things like Netscope to look at the cloud side, because you have to take that into account now. I mean, our organization is, we're, a lot of our solutions that are being replaced with SaaS solutions that are in AWS or in Azure. And so, I mean, we're using Netscope to really look at data that's leaving the premises and moving into the cloud, and we're being able to audit and tie it to accounts and see, what people are doing with it and, what cloud solutions are active on the network, and then we're using, like I said, then down on the endpoints, themselves. I mean, ESET having their headquarters here. I mean, they're awesome partners. I mean, we're using them, but we have Carbon Black on top of that because, I mean, I don't trust anybody.
That was actually what Derek was just saying. Derek Cheng over at EA was talking about Carbon Black and the movement away from traditional signature-based AV.
Yeah, I mean, and so that's what we're doing is we're using Carbon Black from the behavioral standpoint, and with all the different threat feeds that we have coming in, and thank God we've got Splunk that we're building out the dashboard so we can view all of this as we're coordinating. It's kind of like this big electronic ballet that's going on. It's quite unique.
I like that.
But that's what it is. I mean, it's this whole digital orchestra of different types of technologies and data and what your users are doing with them. And many of them have unique business cases. They're providing unique services to the citizens. And so you're trying to figure out from a security perspective, how do you protect what they're doing but not get in the way of the business?
Do you think there's more information sharing today than there was yesterday? So Derek and I were talking about the fact that in 2016 it seems like as practitioners, historically we've not been that great at sharing data with each other and indicators with each other and lessons learned. It was kind of more of an more elite than thou kind of attitude among security engineers. And I'm wondering what your experience has been and if you think that is starting to change, where there seems to be more knowledge sharing among us.
Well, I think there's a move towards knowledge sharing and collaboration. I mean, I write articles on it and basically tell them, I constantly am saying over and over again, that you can't do security in a vacuum, but, it'll thrive in a community. You have to have a community if you expect to survive at this. Because, I mean, the bad guys are sharing information. I mean, we'd be stupid not to, and, I mean, that's one thing I have to admit here in San Diego is it's a very collaborative community, from the CISO roundtables to, where we get together behind closed doors for dinner and we talk to each other. I mean, I can tell you we had some malware issues here at the city, and, I made a phone call to several of, the local CISOs here, and they sent their IR teams over to help out. Just sent them over and said, here, and to come over and help out and, to help us with stuff. I mean, that's what I'm saying is that it's like that. Hey, I need some issue. I've got an issue. Can you help? Sure, not a problem. My guys will be over in an hour. And it's that kind of stuff. I mean, we have to be able to talk to each other and share information, and it goes beyond just a threat feed. It goes beyond just attending a conference. You have to follow up. You have to go ahead and talk with one another. You have to share information. And to me, what I've seen is like, there's a movement now. There's a whole group of like-minded CISOs. We're constantly talking to each other back and forth. I mean, Matt Stamper and Bill Bonnie. I mean, we're actually publishing a book on Amazon next month.
Oh, yeah, congratulations! I remember seeing that on Facebook.
And we actually wrote it for the young CISOs. For the first CISOs that are starting out, for security professionals, and it's all focused on issues that they're going to face. And the biggest thing that I constantly talk about in that that book is collaboration. You have to go ahead and rely on each other and talk to each other. I don't see how you come in this field of cyber today with the amount of the threat landscape that we're facing, with just the amazing fast movement in technology, and you not reach out to your peers, you not reach out to your network and ask for assistance on issues, or share, or go ahead and help people.
Well,
it goes both ways.
Yeah, well, you bring up a good point. We were talking about, the nuances of securing cloud servers where you don't own the infrastructure, right? So, even forensics in the cloud is difficult. And I remember at the AITP Cloud Conference, we were kind of talking about this, and in the panel, and dealing with incident response on an EC2 instance, or a cloud provider not allowing you to even do forensics at all to image, DD image the drive to, you're relegated to what security controls are available in the AWS marketplace, or Azure Security Center. How have you gotten around that challenge, or are you still kind of trying to figure that out?
Well, I can tell you, for us right now, we have a massive private cloud infrastructure. Yeah, we have, like I said, we've moved everything to vBlocks that we have in multiple data centers. Okay. And we're just now starting to do Azure and AWS, but it's more from a dev perspective. We don't have anything production-wise.
Okay.
And eventually we may move some of that. There's been some talk about DNS and some other issues that might be better to go ahead and run in a in an infrastructure, as a service type, perspective. Microsoft and several others have been, coming to talk to us. And there is, some people are just doing a lot better than we would be able to, and I have no problem being able to leverage that. But with that said, I've got 1.5 million citizens that are expecting their services that we have to provide. And, the whole idea about smart cities is the fact that, I've got 1.5 million citizens today. But they are projecting that within the next 30 years, by 2050, 2060, I will probably have about 5 million citizens who are going to be expecting clean water, education, transportation, power, all of these different things. And if you're if you're working for a municipality, the only way you're going to be able to do that is you have to leverage technology. You have to leverage technology to be able to provide better services and still try to keep your costs down. And if you know anything about cities, projects that are 30 years in the future, you think, well, hell, I can wait until then. Well, no, you can't. Some of these projects require 10 to 15 years of planning and installation. So, some of these projects really require us putting platforms into place, putting, policies, putting things into place now, frameworks wise, with a view of risk and everything now, so that within the next 10 years, as they start planning for what's going to be needed 30 years from now, it's already, it's already the way business works. It's already, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah. If you look at what's interesting about your role, in protecting the city is digital transformation happens in other industries like, connected cars and autonomous vehicles. Your city's going to need to, cities are going to need to build the infrastructure for that, right? You need to be able to support that, and what devices get installed and get connected to be able to support an autonomous vehicle, not not plowing over citizens crossing the street, So,
and the issue you run into a lot of that is, there's infrastructure that you have to put in place, but you have to put that infrastructure in place and not interfere with the current business.
Right. Not impact.
Which even adds a level of complexity that most companies don't deal with. It's quite unique. Yeah, basically it's a big pain in the ass, but
yeah. You definitely have a lot to do. So what's next for Gary this year, 2017? What's the next big one? What's the next big project?
Well, we have. I'm looking at putting a full data governance, program in place, and I'm going to tie it into, our chief data officer, Maxim Procheski. We're going to tie it into what he's doing with open data. So we're looking at, kind of looking at our data from a full life cycle, and that's actually going to be fun because we've got about 5 petabytes of data. And
Oh
so
yeah,
we're
no,
gonna
that should, that's not that much.
oh yeah, we're probably gonna do that. Yeah, we're just gonna knock that out on a weekend.
Was that like 5,000 terabytes?
So like I said, so we're going to go ahead and, that's one of the things that we're working on. And then, from a security perspective, we're continuing to build out our SOC here as we've got Nessus deployed and everything, and we're tying it into Splunk, and, we're building out all of our dashboards and stuff. There's a lot of training, for my team. We're tying in public utilities now and working with a lot of the SCADA and ICS networks that they have there. So it's, we're going to be busy. Yeah, we're definitely going to be busy.
Oh, well, good luck on that. So final question, technologies. What are your recommendations for technology? I know we touched a little on behavioral anomaly detection. We talked a little bit about endpoint. You mentioned some network controls. Well, what is in Gary's secret war chest you would recommend?
Well, I mean, I can tell you what I find is actually kind of unique. The biggest thing for me here at my level is to be able to get funding, to be able to get the executive championing of what I'm doing, is to be able to go ahead and take all this threat, vulnerability, all the stuff that I have from a security perspective, and put it in a business discussion to talk about risk, and explain to them about loss of services, and be able to give them a monetary, dollar amount. If we have a breach, it's going to cost this much.
Right.
And it's almost freaking impossible to do that. Except by accident at a hackathon, I found a startup, that is doing that.
Oh, wow.
That has, and they're based out of Baltimore, they're based out of Maryland, and they were actually out here at San Diego at a startup, at a hackathon. And the company's called Pivot Point Risk Analytics, and the solution's called CyVAR, CYVAR. And what we started doing was, I've been actively working with them for the last 6 months. You put in the applications that you have. Like for myself, I'm not going to put in 400 plus applications that make revenue, because the city's a $4 billion business. So I'm not going to put in my 400 plus applications, but I'll put in the top 10%. So you put in your top 40 applications, you put in the revenue behind them, and the data types that they're associated with, HIPAA, PCI, whatever. Then you put in your security controls, whether you're using the CIS top 20 or whether you're using, NIST, CSF, or ISO 27000. So you put in your security controls and, be honest, where are you at, what level you're at, what you're screwing up at, what you're working on, what's fully, installed. The algorithms run against it, and then they actually give you, the dashboard's amazing. We know right now if we have a breach, it's going to cost us about $4 million. Oh, wow. And that we have about 76 million exposed, cost-wise, for the types of data and everything that we have. And if it really goes south, like if we have a major breach, we're looking at about $500 million, in loss.
Well, does it have the capability to help you make risk-based decisions?
Oh yeah, what it does is, along with that, it also goes ahead, it gives you recommendations based on your technology and your security controls. And these recommendations, each one of them has a dollar amount of, okay, if you put this control in place or work on this control, you can reduce this much off of your risk baseline. Well, those recommendations are really security projects. They're security controls or issues that you can work on that are now visible, from the data. And it's only as good as the data that you provide, And so I took a lot of those controls, turned them into projects, put that on my budget, and when I briefed my chief operating officer, and our procurement and all the our auditors, all the big guys that actually give me funds for the fiscal year, right. My chief operating officer said, this is the first time I understood what the hell you guys were talking about.
Oh wow, that says a lot.
Because we didn't talk about threat and vulnerability; it was all based on risk. And he could actually see, okay, we're doing these projects to reduce the risk exposure to the organization. And it even has a module, even has an ability to where once you go in and you build this out, now I have departments that are doing projects. Hey, we want to bring in Salesforce. Hey, we want to use Acela and stand up this platform because we're going to be doing this, that, or the other. Well, I can go ahead and now take my baseline that I have in this solution, and I can put in, we're going to be bringing in Salesforce, and I can watch my baseline change. Oh, wow. Either negative or positive. And if it changes negative, and it'll come up with recommendations, things that we should possibly work on to reduce that risk, I can go back to my department before they've spent taxpayer dollars and they're putting together their business case for this, for what they're doing, and say, hey, just to let you know, these are some things that you're going to need to be aware of. My team can handle it, or you need to factor it into your business case, and so that way they're already looking at risk, they're already looking at security issues as they plan their project before they even spend money.
Oh, wow. Yeah, I'm sure some of our listeners want to check that solution. That sounds really cool. Is it on-prem or is it a SaaS model?
It's SaaS. It's SaaS. And the crazy thing was that their initial customers were companies that were selling cyber insurance. It was companies that were selling cyber insurance, and it was VCs that were investing in cyber startups. And I found them by accident and got really fascinated by it, and they were willing to make a bunch of changes to turn it into a strategic tool that organizations could use. And ISC Squared just went ahead and did a strategic partnership with them.
Oh, that's so cool. Yeah, we'll have to check that out. That sounds really neat. We're always looking for new innovative solutions. To try and
I mean, it's really interesting. We're finding out that there's several companies now that do a lot of consulting work that they're actually using this to go ahead and help show companies where their risk is at.
Well, what it comes down to is the fact that we're now in an age where, hey, look, companies are not going to fix every vulnerability.
Oh, no.
It's only those that are not, risks that are unacceptable to the business.
Yeah, and that's the interesting thing too, is I find that a lot of times when I talk with my stakeholders, I've got non-technology people. They're just not geeks. They just want to go ahead and be able to provide services to their to the citizens, to their customers. They're just doing their thing, but they're going to be making multi-million-dollar technical decisions.
Yeah.
And the thing about it is that I've really tried to hammer home to everybody and the fact that risk is in everything.
Yeah.
Risk is in all the decisions that you make, and just it needs to be visible.
And you're not going to eliminate it completely.
Yeah, but at least once you see it, then we can actually have a discussion as to, okay, how do we eliminate it? How do we provide other controls in place to reduce it? How do we transfer it? I mean, then we start actually having a real discussion.
Yeah. Well, Gary, I know you have a city to protect, so I'll let you go, but I really appreciate you taking the time to be on our show, and really appreciate the feedback and input.
Bye-bye.
Muchas gracias, Radio Escuchas. I want to thank our guests Gary Hayslip and Derek Cheng for joining us today on the issues affecting them in digital transformation. I also want to thank our listeners who were gracious enough to give us their time away from protecting their networks against the global electronic evildoers. Join us next time for the next episode of LeetSpeak with the magic that is me, myself, and I. Bye.